So you get your grid, and the CPNE goes over the grid with you, and then you get your report, and I would write the report on that sheet that they provide to you, which says data collection. You can write whatever you want to on here. It's just data collection. So I'd write my notes for the report on that sheet, and then the CPNE leaves the room so that you can write your grid. And honestly, it took me 30 to 40 minutes to write my grid. Maybe you guys will be faster than that, but it really helped me, and it made me really organized, and so it made the rest of my PCS a lot faster because I did take the time to write a good grid at the beginning. All right, so this is going over the grid that I made for myself. So I did... when I got my paper, well, you can use the very last page on your booklet when you're at the CPNE, and I would fold it into thirds. So that makes these 3 columns. I'd fold it into thirds, and then I'd fold it in half and in half again. So that would give me these 12 boxes. So it wouldn't look like this where it's, lines drawn inside the paper. It would look like I take the last page, and it's connected to something, it's connected to the rest of the booklet, but you can still do this. So I would go a third and a third, so the long way, folding it a third and the long way. And then, well, because it's part of a booklet, like when I was practicing, I would fold it this way and this way again to make 12, but because it was in the real CPNE, it was part of a booklet, so I couldn't fold it that way. So then I just guessed where the halfway mark was, and then I divided that in half. And then I drew in this line and this line, so that I ended up with 12 boxes just like this. And then I just memorized, this is my template, but I memorized how to do this, and so I can write this all down by memory here. I just printed this out this way so I could edit it as I went and kind of refine it. So I have name, date of birth. Honestly, when I was in CPNE, I didn't bother with the date of birth because I was always checking the actual PCS assignment form when I was verifying ID. So I just ended up putting their name just so that I could refer to them by name and not forget their name if I was looking at the grid. So I didn't do the date of birth. So I write their name, let's just say Susie, because that was my dummy patient. And then what I would do is when I asked, what would you like me to call you? I put that in quotation marks. So let's say Susie likes to be called Sue. So I would write down Sue there. So then I had CHAMP, CHAAMP. So their comfort level, their history, so what things in their history that were important, allergies, if they had alarms, if they use mobility devices, and then what their pain level is. And to be honest, I really didn't use that when I was in the CPNE. I didn't do any of the CHAMP because I was so nervous or whatever, but those are still good things to know, especially if you have comfort management and you want to know the comfort. And then what I would put on here is if you have abdominal assessment, you want to ask what their bowel tones were, which the CPNEs told me that kind of stuff in report. If you have musculoskeletal, you definitely want to put what devices they're using. If you have respiratory, then you definitely want to know what their lungs sounded like beforehand, you know, with the last assessment by the last nurse. So those are things that are important to put there. And if they do have alarms, I definitely would fill that in, because you need to check that when you're scabbing out, when you're going out. So RN, I would put this, these letters belong to this mnemonic, so I'll go like this. So for the RN square, I would put up here, so what I ended up doing was I ended up putting up here anything I needed to let the RN know about. So if it was like, if the oxygen saturation was below a certain amount, then I would put it in red right there, you know, below 91% or whatever. And then the second half of this box was always for supplies. And so I would put as I was writing down my mnemonics, I would like go through the mnemonics, say that it was, say it was comfort and I wanted to give a massage as part of an intervention, then I would put like lotion up here in the supplies box. So that way when I went to the supplies room, I could, and I did do this in CPNE and they were pretty impressed, is I would say, okay, so I need lotion, I need a receptacle, I need a disposable cup for mouth hygiene. You know, I just went down the list and checked everything off as I got it. So then 20-minute check box. So my mnemonic I made is RIMHOT, RIMHOT. So I ended up, you would change these around because I only thought of RIMHOT later. R is for review. I is for IVs, so the IV is what is the solution and at what rate. And then M is moisture or mucous membranes. And then H is hydration, so that is my cue to talk to them about eyes and nose, so everything that goes in and out, and emptying their water and getting them new water, and talking about the urinal or the nun's hat. So that's hydration, my cue. And then O is oxygen. So if they're using oxygen, what percent or what liter? So like 2 liters by, is it by condenser? Is it by wall unit? You know, what's the delivery system? And then T is tubes. So did I check all the tubes for kinking and integrity and patency? So that's there. And then what I also did was, while I was in the mode of the 20-minute check, I also did this with all of my PCSs. I had in and out, so that's what's going in them and what's coming out of them. So is there, if it's IV fluid, it's going in. If it's a Foley catheter, it's going out. And honestly, I put down oxygen too going in, even though it's not fluid. It was just kind of my way of remembering what tubes were going in, that were connected to the patient that were delivering stuff in, and what tubes were connected to the patient that were delivering stuff out. So then we have our vital signs here, and it is temperature, and I did a little asterisk and G for glove, because if it's oral you want to use a glove. Turned out that I just remember that, so I didn't end up having to write the G for myself. But what I did do is all these little asterisks there, I did write those. So the asterisk means you need to say how it was measured. So temperature, this is, you know, your first measurement and your second measurement. And I talked to Rob a lot about that, and he said that basically it's just, they used to require a second measurement and they don't anymore. But this is in case you happen to take a second measurement, then at least you have a column for it. So the asterisk means you have to say by what method you measured it. So temperature, was it axillary, oral, etc. Pulse, was it radial, was it apical, etc. Blood pressure, which arm was it on? For example, respirations, no, because, you know, there's really only one way that we count respirations, so there's no asterisk next to that. O2 was, there's two things. One is the liters per minute, and the other is the method of delivery. And then pain, you need to say what pain scale you used if you're doing pain. So was it the FLAC scale, or was it the verbal numerical rating scale? So that's why the asterisk is next to that one. So I always let this box be med, and if you didn't have a med, then you could cross it out and do something else there, or you could, yeah, you could use it for something else. So at what time? So at 9 o'clock, LASIK is needed, and that's just a reminder to myself so that when I'm looking at the grid, I won't forget that there's something that's due at a certain time, and that holds importance as far as prioritizing the care that I'm giving. And it would be in like big red letters. I might even highlight it. So when I was in the later I'll talk about what I used for what I had in my pocket for the CPNE. So in every single box almost, there's these, so this comfort and PNV and muscle, those are just examples for myself of what, you know, where I would write the headings. But those are all going to vary based on what you're assigned. So it would be across here and in the middle are your AOCs, and then the here and here, the bottom outside boxes, are reserved for something else, which I'll go over. So in every one of these AOC boxes, there is RID, R, wash, and clean. So RID is, you know, your teaching, and then R is the patient's response. You always want to get their response with every single AOC. Wash is, did you wash your hands at the beginning of the AOC? And clean is cleaning the stethoscope if you use your stethoscope, just with, normally with alcohol, depending on where you're at, but that was what my facility, their protocol was, just to wipe it down with alcohol. So I would look at these things before I left the room. So for example, if it was abdominal neuro, I would cross out RID because you don't need to teach, but the other things still apply. So say that it was RID, and I would do CAR, and then I would check everything off as I did it, and I would write my notes over here as to, you know, what their comfort level was and what interventions were done. And then R is response, and this is also response, so it's double response checking, but it's better to, you know, make sure it's written down twice than to not write it down. And not all the mnemonics have R in them per se, response in them. A lot of them do, but it's just an extra way of making sure that you do not forget to ask what their response is. So I would do my intervention, and then I would say, did I teach? And I'd, you know, oh, I forgot to teach, and then I would teach, and then I would check that off, and I would say, oh yeah, I did wash my hands when I came in the room, and then oh, I forgot to ask, what is your response? So when I did that that massage, how did that make you feel? And it made you feel okay. So then I'd always write down in quotation marks their words. It made me feel okay. Okay. All right. So I checked that box off. And no, I did not use my stethoscope for this AOC, so I'm just going to cross that off. And then down here, this is something that somebody else did. They'd write scab here as a reminder to themselves to scab out all the time. I just always remembered to scab out. I didn't end up looking over here every time that I was going to leave a room. That's what the other person suggested. You know, if you want to, you could do clean and scab here if you're only keeping your eyes in the box, but I did write scab down here. I only wrote it down once because my theory was if you are looking over here, you only need to see it visually. You don't have to check it off or cross it off because you're scabbing out of the room and you're leaving. But so I just wrote it down once in reality. And then so I had those 4 things on every single AOC, and I would write in the same box the mnemonic, and then next to it I would write my notes regarding that mnemonic and my assessment. And then when I was done with an assessment, I would take out a yellow highlighter and I would cross it out in a big yellow cross off, big yellow X, so that my eyes didn't have to go there anymore because I was done with that. And that was when I was sure that I was done with everything. And if I wasn't done with one little thing on it, so say I was doing oxygen and I wanted to, I also had muscle, so I had muscle and oxygen assigned in this example. And so the oxygen, you want to measure their oxygen before, during, and after an activity. Well, you're assigned to get them up out of bed and walk them to the nursing station anyway. So you would be combining those 2 things. So I would say I was done with everything else to do with oxygen, but I wasn't done with the O2 element of it. And so I would highlight in yellow just the O2 part of the mnemonic, and then I would draw a red line up to muscle, and then I would write into the muscle activity, that A part of the mnemonic, I would write in O2 before, during, and after, right there in red, so that I knew. And then once that was done, then I could cross this whole box off in yellow, because I was done then with all the elements of the oxygen. Okay, so then down here it always looked like this. So I would write out all these things, all the stuff that I just went over, all my mnemonics, and then I would write my care plan, and I'll talk to you more about this in a minute. And then as soon as I had my assessments written in, I would write them in assessment 1, assessment 2. And then as soon as I had my interventions written in, I would write intervention 1, intervention 2. And then I would write, once I have my expected outcome written out, then I would write my expected outcome right here. So I would have, when I did my assessment, or let me say that better, when I did my plan of care, and you have your 2 assessments up here, I would write those assessments. So what the nursing assessment was in report, I'd write that here. So lungs, crackles, bilateral lower lobes, and O2 91% on 3 liters or whatever. And so then when I went into the room and when it was appropriate time to talk about it, like maybe in the respiratory or oxygen assessment or management AOCs, I would say, so in report I got that you have crackles in your lungs, so we're going to listen for that. And what I would do is anything that applied over here, so anything that was an assessment that I needed to check on so that I could fill out this part over here with what I heard to correspond with what I got in report. I would write that in red or a different color on the AOC. So if it was the crackles and the oxygen, then I would write in the respiratory assessment, say that it was my respiratory AOC was written out here. I would do a box and I'd say crackles question mark, and another box and I'd say O2. Now the O2 is already part of it, but that helps me remember that it is, I'm going to be comparing that with what I got in report, and I can fill it in here So I'd write no crackles heard here, and I'd write O2 93%, and then I would be able to fill that in here. No crackles heard and 93%, but saying it more fully than that. And then over here, interventions. So what my interventions were, so let's say cough and deep breathe. So I'd write it up here. My intervention was cough, so I'd write cough and deep breathe. And then in my respiratory, I would also do the red box and say cough, red box, deep breathe. And then that way, after I did the cough and deep breathe, then over here I'd put what the result was, because you want to know if your interventions worked. So you would say cough, sputum produced, and deep breathe, oxygen level increased to 97% after interventions. And then up here, with the cough, you'd also say the result of the coughing was also not only was sputum produced, but then you'd also write lungs clear to auscultation after. So that's that feeds into your outcome. So you're kind of building your outcome out of these things. When I was first writing my grid at the very beginning, I would write here the outcome I'm trying to reach. So that over here with your outcome, because this is the last box that I looked at before I left. So your scab is just a visual reminder to scab out of the room every time. And I didn't ever scab is just my way of remembering that I'm supposed to check stuff, but I just memorized the the script kind of. So I would look down at the edge of their bed, and I'd say, okay, your bed is locked. And I'd look at the upper part of their bed, your side rails are up. And I'd look in their bed, on their bed, your call light is there. And then I look at the face and say, and is there anything more that I can do for you before I leave? So I'd look down at the bottom of the bed. I look at the side rails of the bed. I look for the call light, and I'd also say, and there's no alarms present, if there's no alarms present, and then is there anything I can do for you? So your bed is low and locked, side rails are up, you don't have any alarms present, your call light is right there, and is there anything I can do for you? So I just memorized the script, and scab is just my way of remembering to do that script. I don't even remember what exactly the scab stands for. I kind of do, but so this is the last box I would look at before I finish my AOC. So I would look at everything, like double check that I did everything, and by that token, I would, before I put my yellow X through anything, I would carefully double check that I had done everything in that mnemonic. And then I would cross it out and I'd say, okay, so now we're going to move on to your peripheral neurovascular assessment, and etc. But then at the very end, after I did all of my AOCs, this is the last box that I would look at. So it says output. So that would cue me in to look at my fluid management flow sheet. And I would also refer to up here to make sure that I wasn't forgetting that, oh yeah, they have a Foley. And so I'd fill out my fluid management flow sheet, and then the outcome. So, and then at the end of my time with the patient, I wouldn't fill this in when I was standing there with them, because I would just be standing there writing on my paper. But this is this is essentially a reminder of, this is what I wanted the outcome to be, and this is what the outcome actually was. So again, these boxes are before and after, before and after, before and after, before and after, before and after. So it's at the beginning of the PCS, and then at the end of the PCS after interventions or what your own assessments were. And so then I'd go into the patient's room after you present your plan of care to the CE, and they tell you if you can continue or not. And then you go into the patient's room, and some of the AOCs or some of the PCSs, I actually took the time to say, okay, so one of the things that we noticed was that you are your oxygen can get a little bit low, and that you have some sounds in your lungs that we don't like. So we're going to be doing some interventions today, the respiratory AOC. We're going to be doing some interventions today, and our hope is that by the end of my time with you, that you're going to have clear lung sounds. And so, does that plan sound okay to you? So sometimes I would take the time when I was talking about like why I was there and what we were going to do today, I would actually mention what my plan of care was with them. I didn't do that with all of them though. But I did when it came to the point of actually doing the respiratory AOC. Then at that point I would mention like, okay, so we're hoping that after you cough that you can have clear lung sounds, So that is my grid. That's how I did my grid, and hopefully it will help you. This was I got a few ideas from other people on YouTube, but this is almost entirely just stuff that I thought up. So it's free for you guys to use. It's free for Rob to use, and it really, really helped me, kept me organized, and it was a great tool. And like Rob said, I did look at every single thing before I felt like I was able to move on. So I might do a cluster of things in the mnemonic. So for PNV, I might check, for the temperature and the color, and the for edema and the cap refill. But then I would refer back to my mnemonic and check off, okay, I did temp, I did color, I did edema, I did cap refill. Oh, I forgot sensation. And so then I would go and do the sensation. So I didn't have to stop after every single thing that I did and check everything off one by one. But I looked, and I did some stuff, and I looked, and if I forgot anything, then I would do that thing again. So that's the grid.